And I think as long as it's not a distraction, Nancy, can you tell me, or do you all actually see the the bar? I know I'm screen sharing, but I don't know if you actually see the control bar at the top. I don't want it to be a distraction to you guys, but I think that
I do not.
okay, great.
Yeah.
So I think what we'll go ahead and do is get started because we have a lot of material to cover. And as I see participants entering the waiting room, I'll go ahead and let them in. And again, since everyone will be receiving a recording of today's presentation, then hopefully they'll be able to revisit what they missed. But we do have a lot of information to pack into a 2-hour time frame. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I want to thank you again. I apologize for last week. Not quite sure what happened. We were having some technical difficulties with Zoom across environments. And so we do appreciate it. We apologize for anyone who had to hang out a little bit longer than you expected to wait to see if this thing was ever going to materialize last week. And we do appreciate your patience, your flexibility. And for those of you who were actually able to rejoin us again this week, we really appreciate you taking the time to do so. That tells us how committed you are to your profession, to your students, and to your desire to learn more about how to successfully support your student with Down syndrome in the classroom setting. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got a lot of material. My name is Elizabeth Lewis. I'm the Director of Education at the Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area. Many of you are probably familiar with us. For those of you who aren't, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about our organization. So Down Syndrome Connection was founded in 1998. We are a nonprofit organization. We've been providing for almost 25 years now, new parent support, medical outreach, direct services, resources, and consult. We have our Education Alliance team, which is me, what we're part of with you. We also have tons of different peer development classes and therapies that we offer. We have self-advocacy opportunities and just a whole lot. Basically, through the lifespan of an individual with Down syndrome, we are there to support that individual through the lifespan, as well as their families and the communities that support them. Now, here missing, it looks like it's missing from you guys, was a picture of our founder, Martha, and her son, Blair. But apparently it's not showing up here on the screen. I'm not quite sure why. But it was a mother of an individual with Down syndrome who decided to start this organization to help spread awareness, understanding, and build relationships within the community to support everybody. Our mission at Down Syndrome Connection is to empower, inspire, and support people with Down syndrome, their families, and the community that serves them, while fostering awareness and acceptance in all areas of life. Now, the Down Syndrome Connection recognized about, well, when our executive director, Nancy, who's joined us today for the presentation, when she came on board almost 15 years ago, she recognized that there was a big need. We were providing support to our families who had children and students with Down syndrome in schools, but there was a big gap. The families had needs and their schools had needs. We were supporting the needs of the families, and we realized that we needed to be supporting the needs of the schools and the educators and the specialists who support our students. And so we created the Down Syndrome Education Alliance. And it was simply built for that, to fill in those gaps, to serve your needs, the needs of our members and the students in your schools. And we wanted to make sure that our teachers and educators, our specialists, our principals, our districts had all the support and resources they needed in order to provide the best education they could for our students with Down syndrome. So the Down Syndrome Education Alliance became what it is because we partnered with dozens and dozens of school districts all around the Bay Area to provide the districts and teachers and paras and specialists with a multitude of resources, direct consult, and training like the one we're providing today, ability awareness presentations in schools so that peers of students with Down syndrome can better understand how to support their peer with a disability. We have created a lending library full of research-based and evidence-based materials, learning approaches that can be used in a classroom setting that we know are effective learning tools for our students with Down syndrome. We have tons of information and resources, and it really came from the idea that our teachers and our districts wanted to recognize and foster and support the unlimited potential in all students. And we came together recognizing that. And because of that, we created an alliance. So it's a partnership, again, that's pretty much a win-win. We're there to provide those free supports and services to you, to your school, to your district, and we're here for you. We were to develop this just to fill in those gaps. And that's how the Down Syndrome Education Alliance came to be and why we're here today with this presentation. So today, I just wanted to give you a general overview of what we're going to be covering. Again, it's a lot of material and we've got a lot of information to share. I do want to let you know that we want to make time, as much time as we can, for questions. I am going to pause after each section where it makes sense. And we can, depending on how many folks are joining us for today's presentation, how many more enter our waiting room, we may just be able to do a simple raise the hand and you can address your question. We can address your questions in real time, or we can utilize the chat window. When it's time, I'll let you know and we can go from there. So today we're going to talk about Down Syndrome 101, basically a general overview of the profile of an individual with Down syndrome. We're going to go through some common physical and cognitive characteristics. We're going to obviously talk about what that looks like in the classroom setting. We're going to learn about the strengths and challenges of our individuals with Down syndrome in the classroom and school setting. We're going to look at communication, behavior, inclusive practices, and effective teaching strategies. And again, with each section, we'll give you some time to think about questions you may have, and we can address those at that time. So let's get started with Down Syndrome 101. Down Syndrome 101. Down syndrome is the most commonly occurring chromosomal disorder. About approximately, and these numbers are always shifting, of course, with each year, approximately 1 in every 750 to 800 babies per year are born with Down syndrome. There are approximately 250,000 plus individuals living with Down syndrome in the United States. A couple of things that you may not know: 80% of babies with Down syndrome are actually born to women under the age of 35. I know there's a myth that older parents generally give birth to individuals with Down syndrome, but that in fact is not true. The average lifespan, if born with Down syndrome, is approximately 55 to 60 years. With new advances in medical technology and studies and attention being spent, we are continuing to expand that lifespan. And we hope that we'll continue to do so as we continue to make efforts to advance our knowledge and understanding through medical research. And common physical and cognitive characteristics. So people with Down syndrome, you've seen them and interacted with individuals with Down syndrome. There are some common physical and cognitive characteristics that come with having Down syndrome. Of course, we're all individuals. It's a wide range. We have a wide range of abilities, strengths, and challenges, but there are some common characteristics, and we'll go through some of those. Let's see. Okay, sorry, thought I was had to admit to somebody there. All right. So a little bit of science here. We don't want to spend too much time on it. Here we go, admitting someone into the waiting room. There are 3 types of Down syndrome. So by far, the most common type of Down syndrome is trisomy 21. It's very, very likely that every student who is supported by you all has trisomy 21. It's not 100% certain, but most of the time, 95% of people with Down syndrome actually have trisomy 21. And basically what that is that there is a triplication of the 21st chromosome. And you can see here in the graphic, we're looking at 26 pairs of chromosomes. And on the 21st, we have 3, a triplication of the 21st chromosome. So it's called trisomy 21, which is why World Down Syndrome Day takes place on March 21st, just in case you weren't aware of that. We have 2 other types, translocation, which actually means that triplication can occur in another chromosome. It doesn't have to be there. And then there's mosaic, where a person may actually present with some of the more typical features, if you will. They may not present with some of the physical and cognitive characteristics that most people do present with Down syndrome, but it only accounts for about 1% of all cases. So very rare. Although we do have one student that I've worked with who does have mosaic Down syndrome. She wasn't diagnosed with Down syndrome until she was about 5 years old. They weren't quite sure. And then after some studies, they realized she in fact did have mosaic Down syndrome. So it's important, although we're going to be focusing a lot on education, right? We're going to be focusing a lot on what's going on in the classroom. It's really important, I think, though, to understand some of the common medical issues that occur in our students with Down syndrome. A lot of our students have medical issues that we should always be aware of, because at the basis of everything, at the foundation, those medical issues can impact the way they navigate their school day, the way they're able to participate, the way they are able to participate meaningfully. When things aren't healthy on the inside, then it's going to show up on the outside. And I think that will help us have more patience and flexibility during the day if we understand that, hey, this kiddo has sleep apnea, right? Or this child at 3 months had to have heart surgery, and it takes a little more effort and a little more work to make it throughout this day. So we wanted to go ahead and just cover some of the common medical issues. I'm just highlighting them here, as you can see. And I'm going to talk about the 2 that are in bold type after I address the other ones, because those are 2 that I really want you to pay attention to. But like I said, heart defects, gastrointestinal issues, there's hearing and vision loss in many of our students, respiratory issues, thyroid dysfunction. I mentioned sleep apnea. That's often a big one, sometimes undiagnosed. So you just have a kiddo that's probably tired at school, your student, and you're not quite sure why. Well, he or she may not be getting enough sleep. Compact ENT, leukemia. We will cover potty training. That is an issue, challenge for some of our students. Precocious puberty, increased rate of illnesses. Now, I want to come back to the top of this. Actually, let's go to the bottom here, the dual diagnosis. So we're still learning a lot, but recent studies have shown that anywhere from 1 in every 7 to 10 individuals with Down syndrome may also have a dual diagnosis of autism, ADHD, OCD, anxiety. They may even have more diagnoses. They may have ADHD, autism, and Down syndrome as well. And that's definitely something to keep in mind because what we know about some of the strengths of our students with Down syndrome may be impacted by some of the challenges they carry with a dual diagnosis. So that's always something to keep in mind. And then, of course, we do understand with some of those diagnoses like autism and ADHD, that comes with some sensory and some sensory processing challenges as well. And so that's something to also keep in mind. Now I want to jump to the top here, which is muscle hypotonia. And it's important to talk about that because every person born with Down syndrome is born with muscle hypotonia. And what that means is that their muscles, their resting muscles, are longer, which make them looser and stretchier. And that impacts the student from head to toe. That includes every muscle in their body, including their mouths, which we'll get into more because that obviously impacts communication. But I think it's important to understand that our students are not dealing with just a cognitive or intellectual disability, and we're going to get a little bit more into that. So Down syndrome is both a physical and cognitive disability. So this impacts your student from head to toe, inside and out. It's going to affect the expressive and receptive communication. From an expressive standpoint, we have that muscle hypotonia that impacts lips, jaw muscles, the tongue. It makes it a lot more difficult to be able to make sounds, to articulate sounds. That's why you will notice a lot of your students with Down syndrome have lower intelligibility levels. That low muscle tone, that hypotonia greatly impacts that. And a lot of our students have to do a lot of oral motor work in order to achieve those sounds. And some of our students will continue to have challenges with that through the rest of their lives. Of course, from a cognitive processing standpoint, that impacts the receptive communication piece, the ability to receive and process information. So with having both a physical and cognitive disability, this makes it more difficult for our students to navigate the physical and cognitive demands of a school day. I'm sure you all have seen your students probably taking a rest, sneaking in opportunities to lie their heads down on their desks or to maybe stretch out on the floor. Well, that low muscle tone definitely impacts their flexibility. A lot of our students tend to be really, really flexible. And, but again, if you're navigating the demands, the physical demands of a school day, sorry, just letting someone else in. If you're navigating the physical demands of a school day, as well as the cognitive demands of a school day, you can only imagine how worn out a student may become by the end of a school day. This also impacts the social emotional development. Students with disabilities may have more difficulty making meaningful connections with peers or reading those social cues. And so that's going to be a challenge for our students. Students with disabilities in general may have a more difficult time making friends at school. And that's going to impact our self-esteem and our confidence and our anxiety. Also, just difficulty accessing learning itself without equitable adaptations and supports in place. So that's why it's important that we look at, from an empathetic standpoint, we look at those physical and cognitive disabilities so that we can start thinking about how we can fill in the gaps for them, how we can support their strengths while recognizing the challenges that they face every single day they get up and go to school. So in the classroom, how does this impact you? How does it affect you and your daily life in a classroom setting? Well, we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about some common learning strengths and challenges. We're going to talk about communication, behavior, effective inclusion and teaching strategies. And then we're going to talk more about transition and a few important IEP reminders that sometimes get lost when we're all trying to just navigate the school day with not just one child, one student in the classroom, but multiple students in a classroom setting. So let's talk about strengths first, because I always like to start with strengths. Our learners with Down syndrome are very strong visual learners. That's a huge strength across the board. Big time visual learners, and that's something to always keep in mind. Strong readers. They gain confidence and understanding through lots of repetition. So repetition is huge. We say, 15th time's the charm. Repeat, repeat, repeat. It's really important to help with that working memory. They thrive with routine and structure. Strong memory when interested and engaged in a topic. Most students I know with Down syndrome, if there is an area of interest, they will not stop until they learn everything about it, and they retain that knowledge. And so that's a huge strength. And it gets us thinking about how we can tie in those interests and those motivators into learning to help them retain the knowledge and carry it with them across environments. Social beings, again, our students who do have a dual diagnosis may have a bit more difficulty engaging and interacting with peers. However, a lot of our students with Down syndrome are very, very social. They love to be the center of attention, and they learn a lot from peer interaction and modeling. Our students with Down syndrome, like a lot of students, really enjoy being helpful. They love to have leadership opportunities, opportunities that make them feel like a valued member of their classroom. They're big helpers, they're strong-willed, and they're determined. And those are all strengths we can lean on to support success in a classroom setting. Some common learning challenges. Well, working memory challenges can definitely pop up there. If we're not being consistent and we're not incorporating tons of repetition, then things a student learned one day, they may not retain it the next day. We may have to work again. And we may have to continue to repeat the same activities, the same lessons, read the same book a lot more than you may with a neurotypically developing child. And so just keeping in mind that we have to keep things fresh, and we've got to keep the same information, repeat back over and over again. It may take longer for a student with Down syndrome to grasp a certain concept. And so you may have to stay on that topic for a lot longer than you expected. And that's okay. With that repetition and with appropriate and meaningful engagement, that student will grasp the information and make progress. And that's the goal. With reading comprehension, many of you may have already noticed that while our students can be great readers, flip those sight word cards and they've got that down, buddy, no problem whatsoever, can even put those sight words into context. But when it comes to reading text and pulling main ideas, the WHs out of that, or being able to talk about the sequence of events that happened and kind of recall from the text that they read. That, again, with that working memory and the processing, the cognitive disability, that's a bit more difficult, and again, may take a lot longer. And you may have to employ strategies that help them succeed in little chunks. And we're going to go through ways you can do that a little bit later in this presentation. The expressive receptive language gap, you're going to hear a lot about that because it's really, really important. Our students with Down syndrome understand a lot more than they can say. Across the board, that's generally the way it is. And so we have a lot of students that have a lot to say and have a difficult time expressing themselves. And so when we have a difficult time understanding their needs, then there can be a breakdown in communication. But it's really, really important to understand that students with Down syndrome often have much, much, much higher receptive language abilities than they have expressive. So always keep that in mind. They hear what you're saying and they understand what you're saying. Difficulty understanding more abstract subjects, right? I mean, same here. Math took me a really long time to really understand and for it to be meaningful to me. And so certain math concepts like telling time and money and just math in general, actually making it real and understanding the value of ones, right? And how a sea of ones can be combined together to create a larger number, and to understand what the value of that number is. These are abstract concepts, and it takes even neurotypically developing children and students, sometimes more time to be able to grasp those subjects. So those are always going to be a bit more difficult for our students with Down syndrome as well. Our students require additional processing time. So where you may ask one student, a peer in the classroom, a question and they can answer right away. Our students with Down syndrome, because of that cognitive disability, and they require additional processing time. But I'll tell you right now, just waiting even 10 seconds, silently counting down 10 seconds after you ask a question, give a directive, etc., you may find that your student can provide you with a meaningful answer. They just require a little extra processing time. So just make sure that that's something that we're mindful of when we're working with our students with Down syndrome. They do require that extra time. And then because of the processing challenges, on top of the physical demands, on top of a noisy classroom setting with a lot going on, our students may require additional prompting or explicit prompts, explicit directives. And so that's just important. That whole group instruction, especially if it's not super explicit, telling a group, all right, everyone, get on up and let's head on out. That may not necessarily register right away with our student with Down syndrome. So you may need to be a bit more explicit with that. And, but with those, we can remedy that, right? So that is a challenge as far as receiving that whole group instruction, but we've got solutions for those challenges. Okay, so with that, I just want to go ahead and check in with you guys before we move on to communication, because communication is a big topic and it's a hot topic and it's a very important one. So before we move on to that, I wanted to check in. It looks like we don't have a ton of folks here. So if anyone has a hand to raise, if you have a question at all right now, please feel free to let me know. And if no one does, no worries at all. We can move on to communication, but I just wanted to check in. Let's see. Looks like we're good to go. And if I'm missing you for any reason, please feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, so let's move on to communication. This is definitely a big piece to cover, and it's a really, really important piece. It kind of ties everything together, quite honestly. So again, let's start with some strengths. I want to talk about the communication strengths in our learners with Down syndrome. They may not have the expressive language skills that their peers have in the classroom. However, they still have communication strengths. So let's look at those strengths, because those strengths are going to help us navigate and support communication with our student. Social beings, we already talked about that. Love to interact, be the center of attention, really enjoy peer interactions and interacting with adults. And being, again, a valued member of the classroom. They're intuitive beings. They want to use spoken language. A lot of our students really put a lot of work and effort into communicating. They want to communicate just like everybody else in the classroom. And so just being mindful about that. Sense of humor. This is a huge one. Our students have a great sense of humor, and we can really rely on that instead of looking at it as possibly a distraction or getting too silly. We can think about ways to utilize a sense of humor in order to help our students communicate or express themselves in appropriate ways, of course, that are okay for a classroom setting. Again, keep in mind, they have a higher receptive language. So they are able to understand, which is a huge communication strength, even if it looks like, they're unable to express their understanding. They have very distinct interests. Now, sometimes that may feel like a challenge when a student only has interest in something specific. However, we can utilize those interests and bring them into the mix in order to help motivate and inspire that student to communicate. They enjoy repetition and routine. That's a huge piece. They enjoy technology, like most students these days. And so that's something we can utilize to help them communicate. And again, very strong visual learners. So where the expressive piece may be a challenge, we know that I can utilize the strengths of being a visual learner, enjoying technology, in order to help them communicate in other ways. So here are some common communication challenges. Again, I want you to keep in mind that hypotonia doesn't just impact their physical body, with walking and holding a pencil. That fine motor piece, I'm sure you've noticed, is a big challenge. Loose and stretchy muscles in the hands and arms. But again, it impacts our ability to make sounds with our mouths, and so it impacts the intelligibility. Apraxia is not uncommon for a lot of our students with Down syndrome. Hearing and vision challenges. If you have an auditory processing challenge or a hearing medical issue or a vision issue or a visual processing challenge, that's going to kind of blur up the channel of communication, or in addition to already having that hypotonia and also having that cognitive processing delay. So that brings us to the cognitive processing piece, receiving the information, thinking about it, and then trying to find a way to respond. The auditory processing challenges, and then again, the expressive receptive language gap. So let's look at how we can fill in those gaps. How can we support communication? And this is huge, because if you don't have a voice, how are you going to communicate your needs, your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, your choices? We all need to communicate. We all deserve a voice. And it's our responsibility as educators to help our students find a voice in whatever way we can. And so we want to share some strategies that we know are effective in a classroom setting. And then we're going to talk more about how we can expand our students' communication, how we can help them build the confidence to let us know who they are through communication in lots of different ways. But here are some great strategies that work in a classroom that are pretty easy to access. For example, the 10-second rule. We just talked about that processing delay. And so allowing your student to have the extra processing time, 10 silent seconds, to be able to process what you said and come up with their answer and be able to deliver that answer to you in an effective way, can make a huge difference. It can really be the difference between you knowing your student and you really not at all knowing your student. Make sure you use explicit, concrete, simple, familiar language. Remember earlier I made the comment about the whole group instruction of, all right, everybody, let's stand on up and head on out. Well, sometimes that can seem a little abstract. So instead, you can use a name, all right, Will, stand up, push in your chair and walk to the door. That's simple, it's explicit, it's concrete, and that's going to set your learner up for a more successful transition when they have those clear, explicit instructions. Make sure you reinforce with visual aids. I can't tell you how important this is from pre-K to all the way through high school. Strong visual learners. Utilizing visual supports helps promote independence. It helps build their confidence. It helps your student take control of their next steps and communicate their choices, what they need, communicate if they need to use the restroom, communicate if they need a break. Please use visual aids to help your student. If they don't have the expressive language ability to be able to do that, then we've got to utilize visual aids in order to help fill in those gaps. Make sure you ensure good positioning. Face to face, make sure you make that good eye contact, that student is turned toward you, hears you, understands what you're saying. You can ask him to repeat if they can. Or you can reinforce with a visual aid to make sure that your words are aligning with what they can see so that they have a better chance of following those instructions and being successful. And then it's really important to have a consistent communication plan across environments. If there's a student who's using an AAC device at home, that device should be used in a school setting and vice versa. We shouldn't just have a device or PECs that you might be using in a school setting, but the parents are using sign language only at home. So it's really important to make sure that we're filling in all those gaps for communication and that the school and home are working together to make sure this student is able to generalize new communication skills across environments. Continuity and repetition are key. So yeah, not being able to speak is not the same as not having something to say. When I do my ability awareness presentations, which happen to be arguably my favorite part of my job, I go to classroom settings and assembly settings at schools all across the Bay Area. And I work with, these presentations are geared towards students, and teachers learn as well, but they're geared towards students. They're there to build empathy in those students, to build awareness and understanding. So these students can understand why their peer doesn't talk in the same way that they talk. But then it also helps them put their detective hats on. It helps them think about how they can solve these problems, how they can be good detectives to figure out different ways to communicate. They come up with lots of different ideas about how one could communicate if they couldn't speak. They put themselves in that student's shoes and they think about ways to help. And I hear students come up with lots of different great creative ideas. And it's inspiring. And as a grown-up, they come up with some ideas that I've never come up with. So I think that it's okay for us to put our detective hats on as well, and for us to think about, again, pulling from our own empathy of thinking about what it would feel like to not be heard, to feel like you're not heard. Then it almost becomes an obligation to fill in those gaps. What can we use? We can use gestures, we can use pictures, we can write if we can write, we can type if we can type, we can point to things, present choices. It's all about making sure the student has a voice. We all deserve to have a voice. And with that, that means we get to utilize all sorts of communication. We can utilize multimodal communication in the classroom, which means all students must be able to communicate in order to participate. So we need to pull in from every type of communication. We accept it all. Do you use verbal approximations mixed with sign language? Sure, okay, bring it in. Do you use PECs with pictures and symbols? Great, let's use that too. Is there technology that you have access to, whether that's, through videos or through like sentence strip apps, like Clicker app, etc.? Can you utilize things like that in order to communicate? Bring it in. Do you have a designated AAC device, or do you need one? Well, let's have that conversation as well. You want to model and encourage the use of the student's main mode of communication. If that student is not expressive, but has a really good grasp on using their AAC device, then it's important for you to make sure that you have access to training or consult to be able to also help use that device, to model using it, to be able to communicate with your student in that way, and model for the peers, maybe involve peers so that they can better understand it as well. We want to make sure that if that student's walking in with either a device, or they're walking in with gestural and verbal approximations, or they're coming in with a book of tons of PECs that they've been using and they have a good grasp on that, we accept that. We respect that as being their primary source of communication, while also pulling in, playing detective, and pulling in all the other ways that we can help supplement that, so that we can continue to build their language and expand their language. The more we have access to, say, the more words we have in our word bank, then the more we can express ourselves. And the more we can express ourselves, the more you get to know who we really are inside. So this is very important. And so with that, use of assistive technology and alternative and augmentative communication is really, really important with our students. Most of our students require some sort of AAC, not necessarily a high-tech device. We have a lot of students who work really hard and have great expressive language skills, but there are some students who do need access to, whether it's light tech or low tech, no tech, or high tech communication. They need access to that. And so it's your job as an educator, if that student does not currently have that, to weigh out where that student is right now. What are that student's current communication levels? How are they participating in class? Does it seem that they are getting their ideas out? Or are they sitting aside and not really communicating during things like circle time or share, or in a classroom setting when you're giving an instruction and they might want to participate but can't quite get those answers out in an expressive, through expressive language? Pay attention to those signs and think about whether it's important for you to have a talk with your IEP team, the family, and be open and look into using either assistive technology and or alternate or AAC in order for that student to help fill in those gaps for communication, in order for that student to communicate. So assistive technology are the systems and tools put in place to help the functioning of an individual with a disability. So that's the thing I want to kind of highlight the differences between this. A lot of times we might have a student that has an AAC assessment and device, but they don't necessarily have the AT piece. And there are a lot of students that actually have great expressive language skills, but the AT is really, really important and necessary for them to access the learning inside the classroom. So there's the big difference there. So assistive technology can help students access the curriculum, can help students access the goal or the homework assignment by utilizing alternative ways of being able to write or read or to communicate or to play. If we think about going back to the hypotonia, and I talked about the fine motor piece, our student who may be able to express himself with language may have a really difficult time grasping a pencil, and which is a result of the physical disability. And because of that, has a really difficult time expressing his ideas through writing an essay, because now we have added on the demand We already know there's a cognitive processing challenge. So we're asking a student to think about what they did over the weekend or their favorite vacation they ever took. And then we're asking them to write their ideas down on a piece of paper, which is a great big demand. And it's honestly an OT demand, right? And so we can utilize things like assistive technology to help that student generate his or her ideas so that they're accessing the goal of the lesson without the additional demands. They have access to technology that can help them choose from a word bank, or watch a video about something where there may be a teacher that's lecturing and the auditory processing may be a little more challenging. If there's, let's say you're in a lecture situation, that student may have access to headphones and a video that covers the same information in a way that appeals to their visual learning strengths. Those are just some examples. And so that's why assistive technology is really important and also very separate than our AAC. Our AAC, it's a subset of AT, right? It's systems and tools put in place for the individual with language impairment. So this is to help them communicate. It is explicitly a communications tool. And so that is, just a second, admitting another, sorry guys, I'm just gonna have someone else joining us, but now, sorry, looks like they're gone. Maybe she'll come back on. The AT helps us access learning. AAC helps us access communication. So one great thing of many that Down Syndrome Connection does is we have a really wonderful team of AAC and SLPs, AAC specialists and SLPs who have put together a low-tech communication library. So when we're talking about, okay, we know now we've got to fill in these gaps. Our student deserves multimodal communication. We need to help with visuals. How do we do this? Well, obviously with an AAC, that's going to take an assessment. That's going to take, determining what kind of AAC is a good fit, a specialist training consult. And you can definitely, if the need is there, then you want to move forward in that direction. But when we're talking about how you can access simple tools in order to help bridge communication gaps in a classroom setting immediately, we have access on our website to a low-tech communications library that our speech and language pathologists and AAC specialists have created. And I'm going to try something here. I want you guys to bear with me. I'm going to try to share a different screen so that you can check out the page in real time. Here we go. New share. Okay. No, let's see. Let's see if it goes this way. Aha. All right. I want to see, make sure, and Nancy, you can let me know. Can you guys see this new share?
Yes, I think we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so on our website, which is dscba.org, we've got that on the slide. You can access tons of stuff. We have an entire education section here that includes lots of different resources. And then over here under programs, we have our augmentative alternative communications page. When you click on that, it takes you to our Expression Connection page. Our Expression Connection is a program as part of the Educational Alliance. We've got another person in the waiting room. There we go. So we have partnered with AAC and SLPs in order to make sure we are helping students get what they need in terms of communication at schools. We're making sure schools We're helping schools get what you need in order to bridge those communication gaps with your students. We actually offer, we will loan, we do device loans. We have different high tech and light tech and low tech devices that we can loan to you to help bridge those gaps in communication. We can offer direct consult so that we can customize how we're going to do that. And just a reminder, if you guys can push mute on your screen there so that we can just eliminate background noise. Appreciate it very much. So we're here to help fill in those gaps, especially if you're going to be going through a long wait with an assessment, and those things take time. Our students need to communicate now. And so we're here to help with that, whether it's through, again, loaner devices or our low-tech library. For those of you guys who use BoardMaker, you may be familiar with some of the aspects and components of our low-tech library, but I want to show you a little bit more about it. We're not going to get into great detail, but I wanted to show you how you can access it on our website. This is a resource that is just amazing. They've put this together, and I'm going to click here on our inventory. When I click on our inventory, you can see this wonderful, very well organized Padlet application that our AAC specialist created. And it looks like a lot, but it's actually quite repetitive. And once you get a hang of it, then you can really understand how to navigate it. It just takes a few minutes of kind of looking through it and seeing what each section is telling you. And so we've got everything here from a legend that will tell you all of the different icons, which will help you access resources, links, core boards, all kinds of different information and resources. So we've got tutorials, etc. So here in the legend, you can see there's the little bar here. You go to each section and you can navigate through each section using the bars. We also have this available in Spanish. So for any of your Spanish speaking students who may need access to, or their families who may need access to materials in Spanish, we have that available as well, which I think is really cool. So let me just give you some examples. So you can navigate this through, again, going up and down next to each section. And also here at the bottom, you can scroll across, and now you can see all of the different kinds of boards that we have available for you to print out. Now, these are just general boards. These are boards that can apply to a lot of different kind of generic situations, right? We also offer customizable boards. And if you have BoardMaker, we have quick links. You might see here with my little pointer, you see it says BoardMaker online link. So if you do have a membership with BoardMaker, you are able to click on this and then create your own customized core board. And this will give you access to be able to import images that are particular for that student. They're very specific to that student's needs, wants, interests. But in the meantime, if you're just looking for some visual aids to supplement your lessons or what you're working on, this gives you a ton of different core boards, and they come in a variety of different sizes. So we've got Core 12, which comes with 12 icons. We've got Core 20, comes with 20 different icons. It just depends on, and here are 30, depends on where your student is, where their present levels are, if they've been using core boards, if they understand how to navigate through icons. But this gives you a lot to work with. So for example, if you are playing a game, we've got core boards that you can print out, laminate, and have with your students. So if your student is engaging in a game with a peer, you can point to different icons. That student can tell you, like, oh no, I lost a turn. They can point to, oh no, now we've just filled in a gap. That student can express himself, or it's time to draw a card, and you can point to draw a card, or they can communicate with their peer by pointing. And let's see if I can move this here, because if I can move, I've got this in my way. Let's see, there we go. I'm gonna just show you some examples of some of the different core boards. So we've got things from shapes and colors and textures, to just general, everything from playground to birthday parties to holidays to every subject, snack time. As you can see, this gives you a good idea. So we have a ton of these visual aids that are ready for you to just print and laminate. And we want you to be able to access communication as easily as possible. And if there is something that you want to customize and you do not have Boardmaker, well, then we're here to help with that as well. You actually can, and let's see if I can go back here. You can actually request, let's go here and see if they're going to let me do this. Here we go. Nope, it's going to just take me back there. Here we go. You can actually request to personalize your board. So we have a form that you can submit right here, and it goes directly to our AAC librarian, who will then take the images you're looking for, the customizable pieces, and will put them together for you in a personalized board that she can email to you. And so if that is something that you're interested in as well, you've got access to that. So as you can see, it's a really wonderful resource, and it really can help bridge those gaps in communication and make your experience with your student more meaningful right away. And so I do hope that you all find that this is a helpful resource for you, because we've really loved it, and it's been an amazing resource for a lot of schools I've worked with so far. We're really grateful to our AAC team for coming up with something so cool. Now I just want to make sure you guys can see the slideshow now. Are you all able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Sometimes these things are a little tricky. All right, so I guess before we move on to behavior, because that's another big one, we can talk about communication, and you guys can ask a question. If you have any questions regarding communication, what we just went over with the library, please feel free to raise a hand or just unmute yourself, and you can ask them. I see a hand raised. Okay. Please go ahead.
Hi, me, Denise.
Yes, that I think, and for some reason I don't see your name on here, and I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
And if you don't mind, if you could say your name and just let us know what you do as far as at school, or maybe the age group you're working with, etc.
Sure. My name is Denise Egan. I'm the instructional assistant at elementary school, primarily working with third, fourth, and fifth grade students. My question about communication is, should we take our lead from the parents as far as what form of communication they prefer to use, or is it appropriate for us, now that you've given us so much great information there, to suggest? Obviously I would talk to my teacher about this first, but so recently I've been working with a student, not a student with Down syndrome, but with very low communication skills with his AAC. But I do have a student with Down syndrome who verbal skills are very low, but his keyboarding, reading, and spelling are amazing. and thinking to myself, maybe, you know, he could use not even needing icons, maybe just like the notes app on an iPad to press the letters to communicate to us.
Mhm.
But now so I'm thinking, should we try doing that in the class and seeing if it helps, or do you think that's something that the parents would, because we'd want it to be happening at both home and school?
I think that's a great question, and thank you so much for that. I think that it's a joint effort. Parents have, they see what they see in the home setting, and parents may not even realize that access to assistive technology in the classroom can help their child access learning, in more effective ways. And so I'd never think that we always encourage. Whether you're, and of course, like you said, you would talk with the teacher about it. But again, all we're doing here, right? It's not that we're not taking a form of communication and saying, this is how he communicates at home, and we're trying to change that. It's really just supplementing. And so if you're looking at the student's strengths and you're seeing that there are areas of need there that aren't being met, then you're finding a solution or a possible solution that fills in that gap that we're seeing, that mismatch. Then I think it's always worth bringing up to the teacher. And that's always worth having a communication with the family. I can tell you, by working with so many families I work with, they are always very grateful when a teacher or an educator comes to the table with ideas that are going to help their child access learning. And so I think that when we're talking about assistive technology to help him express his ideas, to help him communicate, I think that that's wonderful. And I would encourage you to talk with the teacher. This could definitely be an idea that could help fill in the gaps and be a good solution. It may require an AT assessment, but that gets the ball rolling and that gets the conversation started. And we rely on you and the teachers in the classroom to see where those mismatches are, to see where those gaps are. And then when you can actually offer up ideas and solutions that might help fill those in, now that's what it's all about there. That is true collaborative learning and true collaborative teaching. And I think it's great. So I would encourage you to absolutely bring it up to the teacher. And if there's anything we can do on our end, for example, if that student or if their families are members here, and if they're not, they could still reach out to us and we can help them understand from their perspective, what that could look like, so that we're bridging that communication or any gaps that might be there as well. Thank you for that.
I do think they would be open to it. In fact, it was this student's mom who referred us to this seminar.
Oh, wonderful.
So I'm sure that they are very involved with you. So,
Perfect. Yes, no, that's great. So they know that they can always reach out to me. We can have a collaborative call, get on a Zoom and talk about these things. So that's the great part about this, the Education Alliance, is that we act as that neutral kind of middle person to be able to help that, bridge the communication, the homeschool communication piece. So that's awesome. I love it. And I look forward to working with you on that. I hope that they're all receptive to it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Laura, you have a hand raised. Please feel free to.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I really appreciate this presentation, first of all. And the previous participant mentioned something really important, I think, about, I'm sorry, door's ringing, about communication with the parents, and about like, how did the parents feel about using certain devices or certain communication technology or techniques or whatever. And I think that's very important, because I myself had, like, my son had issues with that. And where he was provided something at school, which wasn't really appropriate for our family or for him. And we kind of like struggled. That was like last year. And I'm much more happier this year with the way everything's going. But yeah, I think it's really important for the to take the parents' perspective about what they think that it's appropriate for their family or how their child can communicate. And I mean, even if they just try it, I mean, sometimes like they know schools or the therapist might think, well, no, we have to take things slow or whatever. I'm thinking just try what the parents are saying. They might have a point, and then see what happens from there.
Mhm.
And yeah, and where he is right now, it seems like, I feel like the communication is better with the school, and they are trying things which I've asked them to, and it seems like, he is benefiting a lot more. So I just wanted just to mention that, since somebody did mention about like communicating with the parents and so on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Laura. I think that that's a great perspective to share. And ultimately, and ideally, that's what we want, that parents are equal members of the IEP team. Parents are their children's best advocates and best experts. And so ultimately, a collaborative conversation where parents are working with the school team to share ideas, and the schools teams working with the parents to share ideas, so that the solutions we're coming up with in order to help foster success for that student are being practiced and generalized across environments. But that's that healthy homeschool communications piece. And I absolutely believe that schools should always weigh in on what's working at home with the families and the parents, and schools should share what seems to be working at school. And then you all can work to meet in the middle to come up with a plan or a strategy that seems that it will, again, help the student make appropriate progress, help the student communicate, help the student become more involved and participate in a more meaningful way. And so I appreciate you sharing that perspective as well. Did you re-raise your hand, or was that an accident?
Was that me? It was an accident, probably. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right. Well, with that, I don't think we have any other questions on this topic, at least for now. Of course, if we have any time at the end of this, feel free. You might be revisiting or thinking about something that we've covered, and you might have a general question at the end, and we can address those as well. But let's move on to behavior. This is a big topic, and it's something that I know probably most of you, if you work with a student with Down syndrome in your class, you may have encountered some behavioral challenges. And there's a reason I put this right after the communications topic. So when we see behaviors, I think that it's important to really kind of start in this foundational, from this foundational perspective of, okay, why is this happening? Instead of like, oh, this is happening. Let's think back on what we've learned about Down syndrome. And let's think back on all the challenges that our students are facing. And let's think about why these behaviors are occurring, so that we can get to solutions that are actually going to be effective. So let's start with common reasons for behavioral challenges. Well, health concerns. Maybe a student's not feeling well. Maybe those gastrointestinal issues are giving them a tough time that day. Maybe your student has sleep apnea and you're not even aware of it. Maybe your student has a dual diagnosis or the compact ENT. You may think that they've got that they're sick all of the time, that actually just has that extra mucus that they're producing. And that might impact their ability to breathe properly and to feel like they're 100% and ready to participate. It's always important to understand your student holistically, so that you can rule out health concerns. Obviously, when you have cognitive processing challenges and intellectual disability that comes with the social emotional piece, the challenges there as well, because that will develop differently as well and maybe more slowly. So difficulty controlling impulses, putting that stop sign up, that is, more difficult. Difficulty communicating when we can't express our feelings or our thoughts or our ideas. We're going to have we're going to find another way to communicate it. I know plenty of neurotypical adults who use behavior to communicate when sometimes they have a hard time using their words. So this doesn't just relate to individuals with Down syndrome, but it's important to remember that individuals with Down syndrome truly may have a difficult time actually communicating their thoughts and feelings. Some difficulty relating to others, especially with our older students. They start to understand more and may become and feel more unrelatable. They're not making as many peer interactions as other students are in the school, and yet they want so much to be a part of that group. And that comes with complex feelings and emotions. It comes with anxiety, and that can lead to isolating yourself or withdrawal or non-compliant behavior. Difficulty managing frustration. Again, putting that stop button, being able to stop, take some deep breaths, process your emotion and move on. That's going to be a more difficult process for someone with cognitive disability. And then when we think about, especially our students who have a dual diagnosis and may have significant sensory challenges, they might have hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity or a combination of both. If they're dysregulated, that's going to lead to behavioral challenges as well. Now, in a school setting, and all of those, those reasons that we just listed, those are all, pertain to a school setting as well. However, when I'll tell you, in the many years I've been doing this, and the many schools I've worked with, and many students I've worked with in those schools, and the students who have behaviors, and the IEP teams who end up doing a behavior intervention plan or a functional behavioral analysis, when we start really identifying a lot of functions of behavior, we see a really common thread of function or of the reasons for the behavior when it's related to academics, okay? Specifically to academics. So one is communication. The student does not have access to communication tools to be able to express his or her understanding in a way that works for them. So they're not able to let you know what they know. So when you can't let someone know what you know, then that person's not going to understand what you understand. And therefore we've got a breakdown in communication. And the other thing is demand. If there is a student with Down syndrome who is participating in a general education classroom setting, and the curriculum is not being modified appropriately in order to align with that student's strengths, that student's abilities, and that student's current IEP goals, the demand is too high. It's inappropriate. And that leads to anxiety for a fear of failure. Our students with Down syndrome go through all the same variety of emotions we go through, and that includes fear of failure, anxiety tied to failing, to looking silly, to not doing what everybody else can do. And so when all of those, that's kind of a perfect storm for behavior, right? We can't communicate what we know. You're giving me work that's not appropriate. It feels over my head. It feels overwhelming. It's not aligned to my strengths. And now I'm going to look like a failure in front of all my peers. And wanting to be a part of this group is one of my biggest desires. We can all clearly see how this can lead to behaviors in a classroom setting. And so it's really important, again, to start with that place of empathy. understand the why, and make sure that what we can control, we're controlling, that we are helping. um, we're bringing in the tools and the strategies and the supports that student needs to eliminate the communication struggles, to eliminate the inappropriate demand. Then we're building success from within. We're building their self-efficacy and their confidence. And now they don't have that fear of failure because they know they can do it. They know they've got this, because we're giving them the supports they need in order to achieve their individualized goals, not the classroom goals. So that's important, and we'll get into that for sure. So I like this. This is definitely obviously from the UK, as we're the behavior with the OUR, but there are functions of behavior for all of us. It doesn't matter if you have Down syndrome or it's you or me. There are always functions to our behavior. Either we may be dysregulated. We need a sensory outlet. We all probably, some of you probably chew your nails. Some of you might pull your hair. Some of you may tap on your desk or tap your knees. Some of you may scratch certain things. These are self-regulating techniques that we don't even realize we're doing half the time. So sometimes our students need a little extra access to sensory opportunities. When their bodies are dysregulated, maybe they're overwhelmed by a stimulating environment. Maybe they are needing some sort of feedback or input because they have that hyposensitivity. Whatever it is, some of our students just may need access to some preferred sensory experiences, something that feels good for them to do. And once they can do that, it can help regulate them at their core. It can bring their equilibrium back into balance. And if we're out of balance, when we're checking in with our own nervous systems and we're feeling dysregulated, anxious, kind of scattered, we're not able to focus on the task at hand. And we need to keep that in mind for any of our students who seem to show preferences towards sensory types of items or activities, or they show a sensitivity toward loud sounds or textures, or they show that they need a lot of feedback. They like push their bodies into things, or they may need to dig into things. You'll see them scooping in the dirt at recess, etc. So that is one function. So we might see behaviors happening when someone needs to regulate. Escape. They don't want to do it. And so they want to escape from the activity or the interaction that's non-preferred. It's not desirable. So let's think about that. Let's say your student is just learning number recognition, but they've got a worksheet in front of them with 10 addition problems because that's what the rest of the class is doing. That means that we've now given them an inappropriate demand. And so an inappropriate demand, something that's confusing or overwhelming, is going to be non-desired. And if it's not desired, that student may try to escape. They may engage in eloping, running away, hiding under a desk, because they just want to escape the thing that's in front of them or the activity that's just not desirable. And it's up to us to understand why it's not desirable, instead of just, oh, they don't like this. That's just not what they like. Sometimes that might be the case, but it's up to us to put those detective hats on and dig a little deeper. Attention. Oh gosh, our students love attention. And attention is a rewarding, whether it is proactive, positive attention from someone, giving them high fives for getting on the job and doing it, or it's that attention for engaging in that challenging behavior and we're reacting. It could be the student clears the table because the demand is difficult or the activity is non-preferred, or they're dysregulated completely and don't know how to express it. And then the students around them either laugh or gasp, where the teacher says, "Don't do that, Danny." Wow, that's all attention. It's rewarding. And so once they get that attention, it's reinforcing and they're likely to repeat the same behavior over and over and over again. And then tangibles, they want access to something. I want to play with this, even though we're playing with this. And if I can't communicate that in an appropriate way, I'm going to engage in a behavior to get me access to that. All kids do it. I want an ice cream, Mom. No, start crying. You're going to do a meltdown. And then Mom says, okay, you can have the ice cream. So if that behavior gets them what they need, then they're going to continue engaging in the behavior. So how do we figure out how to work with that? And how do we figure out how to understand the function of the behavior? Well, it's all about remembering your ABCs, understanding the antecedent, which is the thing that's happening right before the behavior occurs, right before it occurs. Looking at what the behavior is, and then understanding what the consequence is. So, for example, one of my students that I've worked with had a really difficult time during whole group reading. Students were asked aloud to read passages out loud. They were asked on the spot questions about what they just read. So during that part, every time they get to whole group reading and the students are there, that student did not have access to modified materials or assistive technology that would help him access the content, didn't have access to visual aids that might help him participate in the group activity, but just in a differentiated way. And so every time he got to that part of class, and it was just coming from recess, which is a preferred activity. So here the antecedent is, we transitioned from recess to a non-preferred activity because the non-preferred activity didn't give him the communication tools he needed to participate and wasn't modified for his strengths so that he could participate meaningfully and feel a sense of success. So what was his behavior? He would clear the desk, run and hide under the table, throw his body down. He would sometimes act aggressively toward a peer next to him. And so he would engage in super disruptive behaviors. And every single time he did that, his aide would take him out of the classroom, walk him to the principal's office, where he would get a one-on-one with the principal whom he loved spending time with, and sit in the chair, got out of doing the whole group lesson and got to hang out and get some one-on-one attention from the principal. So we can see why that behavior occurred every single day. So when we can take a look at that, the antecedent, the behavior itself, and the consequence, we can start to understand, what the function is. So to me, I would say this was to escape the non-preferred activity, and it's being rewarded by him being able to escape and avoid it, and being able to, the consequences that he is something preferred and desirable for him, which is a one-on-one with his principal. So when we understand, and I'm gonna, before I go through this part, when we understand the function of the behavior, when we can take a look, if you're seeing a consistent behavior in the classroom that's happening throughout the day, whether it's a transition from a preferred activity to something non-preferred, or maybe you're in the middle of circle time, maybe it's a loud environment, pay attention to what's happening. Look at everything around you. Look at the facts about your student. Understand, look at the demand, what's being asked of him or her in that classroom setting. What were they just doing? And what's happening after he or she is presenting with this behavior? So then once you do that, you identify the function, you can help that student replace the behavior with something that's more appropriate that achieves the same function, right? So now when the student transitions into the classroom setting, he gets a big helper job. He gets to pass out the pencils to all of the students and paper to all of the students. He sits down and has access to visuals and a shortened version that his teacher gave his parents earlier that week, that he practiced reading at home, so that he can read the text, a shorter part of the text, not the same kind of paragraphs everyone else reads, but a shorter paragraph that he's been able to practice. He's been able to feel successful with it. And even if he's starting to feel overwhelmed, we also now have a visual break card for him. So now he has access to a communication tool, if he can't use his words, to request a break if he's starting to feel overwhelmed or feel that the lesson itself the demand is hard. So now we've replaced the behavior with appropriate communication tools and actions that help him feel heard and helps him feel recognized and respected as a member of the classroom. And what he gets in return is tons of positive praise from his teacher, from his aide, from his peers around him. And he has that innate sense of success and that he did it. We're building his self-efficacy. And now he doesn't want to or need to run from the classroom because now he can participate. So that's just an example of how you can really kind of hone in on these behaviors. And instead of just wanting to pull your hair out, put that detective hat on and see why this is happening. And then we can get creative about our solutions and give our students an alternative and more appropriate way to communicate how they're feeling at the time. So I've got put together some helpful strategies that I'll tell you work. These are the strategies I use all the time and that I tell teachers to use all the time in the classroom setting. Make sure, we've already talked about this, everything is clear and explicit. You got to make good eye contact. Stick to a routine. Routine is really important. This helps our student understand next steps and take control over his choices as you navigate the day. Utilize strengths and interests to motivate and engage your learner. I can't tell you enough how important that is. For example, I have a student who is obsessed with Harry Potter, Student does not want to work on using a number line, even though it's a great visual aid with the goal. It's just not as interesting, right? It's like, it's just some numbers on a number line. We've got manipulatives there. We can reinforce. We've got a calculator. Okay. How can we incorporate this number line so that one of the IEP goals is start at a random number and then add on, count from there. And so a number line is really helpful with reinforcing that. Well, what did we do? We brought in a little miniature Harry Potter wand. And so now he can use his magic wand to point to the number that he needs or that we're starting with, and then point to each number using his magic Harry Potter wand. It's that simple. All of a sudden, we took something that seemed impossible and we thought about the students' interests and motivators, and we got creative to help make this more meaningful for the student. And with that, it was, the student is now engaged and wants to participate. And I don't know, Laura, if you are raising a hand, and I will stop after our communications piece, the behavior piece, to take questions, if that is okay with you. Let's see, some other reinforcers. Let's see, use a visual aid to reinforce expectations. Things like a simple schedule or a first then chart are really effective for our students who are strong visual learners to see what's expected of them and what comes next. that helps with that anxiety of not knowing what's in front of them. It makes everything a lot more concrete and predictable, and therefore helps them stay more regulated and in control of what's happening. Usually utilize a visual timer. And I always say leave room to negotiate for more time. So let's say you've got 10 minutes left actually in an activity. Let your student know you've got 5 minutes left. Set the timer. This is a great strategy for non-compliant behaviors. They can see what's expected of them. Or, okay, how about this? You have a student who really loves an activity. They're working on a preferred activity, and they don't like to transition from that preferred activity to a different one. You got 10 minutes left, say you have 5 minutes. Set your timer for 5 and let them know if they need more time, they can use their words or a communications tool to ask for more time. We're now replacing a behavior that might look like eloping or clearing a table, or throwing themselves down on the ground because they don't want to move on to the next activity. We're now giving them an option to have a voice, to feel heard. I like this and I want more time. So then you can ask, okay, thank you for using your words to ask for more time. Would you like 1 or 2 more minutes? Have them choose, set it for that amount of time. And so you're leaving room to negotiate for, to kind of fade it into, all right, so we've got 1 more minute. And now after this minute, we will be all done. But I do love that you used your words. And when we're ready to go, are you going to march to the classroom, or are you going to ice skate, pretend to ice skate from the recess yard? So we have now empowered this student to have a voice. And we have taught the student a more appropriate way to communicate his thoughts and feelings and needs. And now we are also praising that, and we're filling that student with, we're empowering that student with confidence, so that they feel a little bit better about leaving what they were just playing and moving into the next activity, because they felt in control, they felt heard, and they felt respected, that their voice meant something, that their thoughts and feelings meant something. So visual aids and visual timers are a great way to build that confidence and build that independence, and to help reduce power struggles. Empower your student with choice. Students with Down syndrome, if given a yes or no question, may immediately result in the last thing they heard, or like, well, okay, let me back that up. If you ask a yes or no question, do you want to play? They may say no. Or, hey, will you go try using the bathroom? No. A lot of times no is the default. And so try presenting with 2 visual choices, instead of it's time to write, here's your pencil. How about, would you like to use the red pencil or the blue pencil? Or would you like to use a marker or a pencil? When we can kind of redirect through choice, again, that is another way for the student to feel heard, and in control of their choices. So that is a great strategy. Simple, giving choices is a big one. Avoid safe attention-seeking behaviors. If it's not super disruptive to the class, and it's just simply something that that student's doing to get your attention, try avoiding eye contact. Just turn your body away, and maybe even point out an appropriate behavior a peer is doing in the classroom. Like if this kiddo's like kind of like poking your arm and like, or not being, kind of being nonsensical, you can turn and say, I love how Johnny is sitting with his hands on his lap and ready to learn. And you'll find our students who really like to imitate other students, and they really value what their peers are doing and what their peers think. They may self-correct in order to kind of maintain that status quo. They see that you're giving your attention to someone else doing the appropriate behavior. They may have more success in self-correcting and engaging in appropriate behavior. Pick your battles. Flexibility goes a long way. That is a huge one. If a student wants to, again, doesn't want to use a pencil to write, let them use a marker. Give that choice. Be flexible with it, because at the end of the day, we're trying to build successes here. We want the student to feel safe and secure and confident in his or her learning environment. And his physical and cognitive disabilities make that harder than it does for other students. And so flexibility is really important. Us being able to take a deep breath, empathize with what they're going through and saying, okay, how can I be flexible here? Because a one size fits all approach just simply doesn't work in this case. And generally it doesn't work. And then find creative ways to redirect that may also help keep your student regulated and feeling like a valuable member of the classroom. This is a huge one. Big helper roles, heavy work, pushing in. If your student doesn't like to transition from one environment to another, let's think of ways we can redirect that kind of fixation on not wanting to do it and give them a role that makes them feel like a big helper, that you need them and that they got this. And so whether that's carrying heavy things or pushing books around, handing out, dispensing sanitizer to their peers, ringing the bell for transition, pushing in chairs, pulling mats, putting away toy bins, ask them how strong they are, encourage them. Let me see your muscles. Are you strong enough to do this? These are things that make our students feel valued and a meaningful part of the classroom. And I think it's always great to look for those opportunities, because that's going to maximize that student's participation and ability to interact and engage with peers and just feel good overall about being a member of that class. We've got more. Please try to avoid using confusing phrases like no thank you. For me, I'd have to say that's one of my pet peeves, because it is it's confusing. If a student's engaging in something that is not appropriate, saying no and thank you together, it's kind of contradictory, right? So no, and that's just general. We don't even know what, and then thank you. And so when we talked about being explicit and being able to give, explicit instructions, it goes the same for behaviors, right? So instead, let's think about a student running. So if you say no, or no running, Will, then that student's going to hear running and will, right? And they're getting your attention because you're saying it to them as they're running away. They may even turn to see if you'll chase, but instead you can say, show me walking feet. And you can model walking feet. You could point to a peer and say, show me walking feet. And now the student is hearing walking feet. They're not hearing no, and they're not hearing running. And then you can give big praise to let them know they're doing a great job. Use proactive, explicit, positive praise. You can do it verbally, through fist bumps. You want to reinforce the behavior when that student's actually engaging appropriately, which may be the time you're not really thinking about it. But when you see your student sitting at a desk with his feet on the floor and ready to learn, think about it in advance. Be proactive with it. I love how Will is sitting, active, listening, and ready to learn, versus waiting for a behavior to occur, and then that's the only time that student hears his name. That's the only time that student gets the attention, is in that reactive and reactionary approach. So we want to be proactive, and we want to make sure that that student feels empowered to do the right thing and to make those positive choices throughout the day, because you're letting them know they've got this and you can do that. Model appropriate behaviors. Modeling is super important. And then make sure you utilize peer supports so they can encourage age appropriate behaviors. Peers are huge influencers to their peers with Down syndrome. So if you see a student in the classroom who models those appropriate behaviors and you think would be a good peer support for your student with Down syndrome, lean in on that. That's very, very important. Another strategy I use a lot is the try again. So instead of, let's say a student throws the pencil on the floor because the demand is hard there, right? Instead of being like, no, 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 we don't throw pencils. No, thank you. Let's go ahead and pick it up and put it away. I don't make a big deal out of that because now we're going to get into a power struggle, right? So instead, pencil goes down. I lean over and pick it up. I don't even look. And I was like, all right, try again. You may need hand over hand. Try again. Hand me the pencil, please. If it's hand over hand, that's fine. Or if you feel like they can do it, hand me the pencil safely. Oh yeah, I knew you could hand me that pencil safely. Now what's going on? Do you need a break? So now we're moving into the whys the behavior occurred, instead of just focusing on that behavior and trying to get them to do it differently and telling them, no, that's not right. We don't do that. Allow time for breaks. Our students with Down syndrome, when they're facing those physical demands of an entire school day and navigating from classroom to classroom sometimes, and recess and lunch and library, now that we know about that hypotonia, you can only imagine how physically exhausting it is. If they're dysregulated, they're also going to need some kind of break or opportunity to gain that equilibrium, get that nervous system back in control. So just make sure that they have access to break time if needed. We need to be flexible with that, especially with our younger students. And then if they do have sensory needs, make sure we have sensory tools available. Some of our students like to chew a lot. They may need like some jewelry. They may benefit from like therapy to warm their hands up before handwriting. They may need a weighted lap band, or a weighted lap pad, or like a TheraBand around the chairs, so that they can keep their feet from swinging around. You can notice when a student seems to be like hyperactive or seems to be seeking a lot of input. And if you're starting to notice those things, we should talk about it and try to see how we can help the student stay regulated through sensory tools. I do want to let you know, if you are experiencing that, Down Syndrome Connection has some tools for you that we can provide to you. I recently got to do, it's fun when you get opportunities to spend money on things that are going to be really effective in a classroom setting. And we were able to buy some materials through a grant to purchase sensory items. And so I've created a sensory box that contains things like therapy, jewelry, little stretchy things, adapted paper and handwriting tools. And so if you do believe that your student would benefit from sensory tools in the classroom, and you want to start that conversation, or you'd like access to an introductory toolkit where you can explore different sensory tools that may help your student recenter and refocus and access the lesson at hand, then please feel free to reach out to me and we can hook you up. Let's see. Oh, this is another big one. Start small and build from there. So if your student is able to attend an activity that's really difficult, we know this is hard. We know they're using a lot of their brain power on it right now, and it might have physical demands as well as cognitive demands. Start small. If they're successful for 5 minutes, even though the rest of the class is working on it for 10, that's okay. As a matter of fact, they may only be successful for 3 minutes. Utilize that visual timer, utilize your first then chart, and say, all right, this is how long we're going to work on it. And once that's done, woohoo, we can do, a little shakedown dance at our desk, and then we'll set the timer for 2 more minutes. Just start small to allow your student to feel success. Remember, they have that fear of failure. And a lot of times demand is inappropriate and they're not able to communicate that demand. So make sure that we're proactively, making sure we're aware of that. And so we can start small. And then once they experience and feel intrinsically that they got this and they're successful at it, their interest in the topic or the subject will increase and grow. And we can start expanding the time demand on them. The fact that they have an IEP means that you have flexibility. You can work with, you don't have to make them do the exact same things that the other kids in the class are doing if they're in, for example, a gen ed environment. And so you can start small and just build from there. It's all about success, feeling that success and empowering them to work harder to achieve more and more goals along the way. And then one quick tip that I always like to talk about is integrating rewards into your interaction. It doesn't have to look like, oh, okay, first we're going to do 5 minutes of this, and then you get iPad time. Think about those motivators and interests. Think about not just motivators and interests as far as like, oh, he loves Harry Potter, but he's silly. He loves to laugh, or he loves to be imaginative and creative. One example I like to use is a student that I was working with. We were working on reading, and we are working on books that are 30, 32 pages long. And even though they're, basic, level 1 reading, it's a lot. That's a huge demand. And I knew my student could do it, and I held him to that high expectation, but it took a lot out of him. And I knew that we needed to incorporate, kind of organically incorporate little rewards throughout the lesson and the activity we worked on together. So instead of having him read it all and then take a break, this was just as an example that we would read a book. I don't know if you're familiar with the Little Critter series, and in the Little Critter books it's always a little mouse and spider hiding on the page, and he loved to find the spider on the page. And so so we came up with a game kind of on the spot where he'd read through 5 pages at a time, 5 or 6, and once we got to that 6th page, he would find the spider, and I would pretend that the spider jumped out and jumped into my hair, did a little swingerling like this. Woo-hoo-hoo. He thought it was funny. It was a distraction, a little bit of a, playful redirection for him. And then quietly, it's nothing big, nothing disruptive to the class. And then whoop, whoop, and it would jump right back into the book. And he would say, again. And I said, okay, well, let's read 6 more pages and we'll do it again. And so we didn't have to take 5 minutes to have a break. We didn't have to, you can incorporate these little kind of intrinsically motivating, creative little rewards into the work you're doing with your student if you know your student. So just remember communication tools. Communication's been a big piece of all of this. Your first then chart, simple sentence strips work, schedules and feeling cards, step-by-step chart, and self-help routines. And you can provide visual choices, use picture icons like from the low tech library I showed you. And then social stories. Our kids love to be the center of attention, and utilizing a social story that you can even customize with their pictures, doing the things that we expect of them in a classroom setting can be very motivating for them to stay on track and to keep that mental thought, that mental image of like what they're supposed to be doing, because they're strong visual learners. It all tracks back. And these are just some examples. Always remember clear expectation and consistent follow through. It establishes routine by having these visual schedules, and it promotes independence. They can start taking control because they actually have this visual schedule in front of them. And as a visual learner, this is a strength, and it's going to help them navigate the school day more independently. Different positive behavioral supports. We have social story example. It's a very simple first then chart and a simple rewards chart, just depending on how old your student is, what they're motivated by, and how many demands you think you can place on them at a time. So just remember, behavior is communication. I think we've established that. Start from a place of empathy, understand the demands that they take on every single day they wake up and come to school, and how exhausting that can be and frustrating when you don't feel heard. and upsetting when the demand feels overwhelming, and the anxiety that comes with fear of failure and not fitting in with your peers because you feel like you're not able to do the same things that they can do. Um, Creative redirection and flexibility go a long way. Focus on those strengths and interests to help facilitate meaningful engagement. I'm just going to touch on these things because we've got still some stuff to cover, and I'm probably going to go a little bit longer than 2 hours. If that is difficult for you as far as staying and attending, we will be sending out the recording, but I do hope you're able to stay and ask any questions that you have. But I'm going to try to move through the rest of this as quickly as possible without skipping over the important stuff, if that makes sense. Stemming are repetitive sounds, actions, or behaviors. You may have noticed your students engaging in some kind of stemming behavior. That could be like flapping hands, or again, like chewing on something. You might hear like grinding teeth and like a kind of sound. And honestly, it is a self-regulation technique. I talked with you guys about how we do it all the time in different ways. We don't even notice, but it does help recenter that emotional equilibrium. It can help reduce our anxiety and calm our nervous system. It does encourage self-awareness. And so we do ask that unless it's super disruptive, if it's destructive, or if it's impeding their development. I've had some kids who are pretty oral, and they have like hurt themselves through kind of a stemming behavior, and we want to replace that with something that's more appropriate, that's not going to hurt them or cause them harm. But if it's not doing those things, try to ignore it and just let them have that. It's not a bad thing. It's just a self-regulation technique. We actually already covered this as far as working with our younger kiddos using multimodal communication, teaching literacy early. I will say that it's just never too early to start. For those of you who know your young students, you've probably seen as we had you mentioned before about your student with Down syndrome who is a strong reader. So teaching literacy super early, it's never too young to start. Remember that expressive receptive language gap. We need multi-sensory experiences, things that are going to be meaning for us. It makes learning real. We're taking from real life and applying it to the learning experience itself. And I don't know about you, but I definitely learn through multi-sensory engagement, not just from sitting down and reading something. I like hands-on learning, and so do our students with Down syndrome. We've talked about motivators and interests, and making sure that we provide breaks for our young students to help awaken their body and their minds. Potty training. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this. It's just that it's important for you to understand that their physical disability impacts their ability to be toilet trained and ready, their potty readiness, or toilet readiness, I guess what it's called. And so children with Down syndrome may be delayed to that low muscle tone, that hypotonia. Just from a developmental standpoint, we know that there are delays there that just might affect their readiness. Sensory processing. Some of our students may have more difficulty feeling and understanding that they have the feeling that they need to go until it's too late. And so it's important that you understand, while it can be frustrating because some of our students with Down syndrome are quite a bit older than we would typically expect for someone to not be potty trained, but it's important for you to understand that it is as a result of this disability that potty training tends to come later. It tends to come, but for some students, it's a lot later than what we would normally expect. So we do ask for you to be patient. We ask you to encourage, but not push. Look for signs of readiness. Communicate with parents so that you guys understand you have a healthy homeschool communication regarding that. Utilize those visual aids to support potty routines and independence. You can have a hand washing routine, a potty routine posted visually in the bathroom to encourage that. And if you need to use incentives or reward system, again, talking with parents and figuring out a consistent plan that works across environments. One caution, bathroom may be overly used as a tool for escape and avoidance. So as we want to revisit that, the functions of behavior, just pay attention to that. And if you are noticing the antecedent, what's happening before they ask to use the restroom? Okay, they're asking to use the restroom this time, every time we're doing this, and they get to use the restroom, right? And so maybe finding a replacement behavior if you don't think that they actually have to go to the restroom, but that it's being used as a tool or a function, right, to escape, or a tool to escape, what they want, that they don't want to be doing. And working with adolescents. This is just important to understand. Just like everybody, our adolescents with Down syndrome have hormones. In fact, precocious puberty is often the case for a lot of our students with Down syndrome. So they may be potty trained, and by a certain age and within the next year or two may already show signs of puberty. And so, that's kind of the kind of challenge there, right? And so just remembering that those hormones exist. Students and individuals with disabilities and intellectual disabilities are bigger targets for abuse. And it's unfortunate, not something we really want to think about, but it is the truth. They have a more difficult time reading social cues. They may have a more difficult time understanding personal boundaries, and they may be more targeted. So it's important for us to model and to hold them to high expectations and healthy boundaries about how we use our bodies in our community, with our peers at school. A lot of our students like to be big huggers. They may get into that personal space, and students may not quite know how to set a healthy boundary. So it's important as a teacher that you teach this, that you model it, that you have an honest and open conversation. It's truly a safety issue at the end of the day. And it's really important that not only your students with Down syndrome are held to those high expectations, and that they are educated about their bodies, about menstruation, if they're girls, about relationships, emotions, behavior, but that their peers are as well, and they know how to set healthy boundaries with their peers with Down syndrome. Students of all abilities need to be held to those high expectations. And social skills and inclusion. We're going to go into inclusion in just a second, and then effective teaching strategies. That's going to round out the rest of our presentation today. But I just want to highlight these key points. It's important that we are paying attention to how we include our students with disabilities at school. Having a student in the classroom participating, in their classroom, maybe being pushed into areas where there are the general population of students in the school. Maybe they're participating fully in a general education setting. Being in the classroom doesn't mean they're being included. And so it's important that we're thinking of how we can open up your school and opportunities to all of your students and welcome them. So encourage those peer supports. Make sure that you are modeling and helping your students understand how they can be friends and supportive friends and develop meaningful friendships with their students with Down syndrome or other disabilities. It's up to you to model that. It's up to you to teach it. Include your students with disabilities to participate. Make sure that they have the opportunity to participate in school activities, in plays, sports, dances, event planning. Some of our older students really like to be a part of the planning piece, or, making signs, passing things out, those big helper roles. Those don't go away. Those are throughout their, throughout their journey at school. We can always find those roles that help them participate with their peers and feel like a valuable member of their school. Start buddy groups. Make sure, encourage parents to set up play dates, or you at school can start a group of buddies with students who want to team up with a student with a disability, your student with Down syndrome, have lunch with them, participate with them in social events in the community that are raising awareness about disabilities or about Down syndrome in particular. Host an ability awareness presentation at your school. They're free. They're not long, they're fully customizable, and it is an amazing grassroots way to help your students at your school understand diversity, to embrace all of our individual abilities and challenges, to understand that we have more alike, more in common than we have differences. It's a wonderful way to develop their empathy and understanding at an early age. And we know that students who are educated alongside typical peers, evidence supports a higher outcome for those typical peers. They're less likely to bully. They're more likely to be involved in community service work. It's a win-win for everybody. And if we can start it in the schools and we can raise awareness and speak openly about disabilities and Down syndrome and abilities and celebrating our differences and how we can hold each other up and support each other at school, we can generalize that into the community. And I know this sounds like a rainbows and butterflies speech, but at the end of the day, it is. It truly fosters systemic change of our mind, of how we look at people and how we don't judge people based on one aspect of their lives, which is that disability, but how we're looking at all the things we have in common, and we're seeing strengths instead of seeing challenges and differences. So meaningful inclusion is welcoming, valuing, empowering, and supporting the diverse academic, social, emotional, communication, and learning of all students in shared environments and experiences for the purpose of attaining the goals of education. And at the end of the day, when we think about what we want, what are the goals of education? What do we want our students to walk away with when they leave school? Well, we want them to walk away with, I use the term mastery loosely, right? A good grasp over certain skills and subjects such as math and literacy. We want our students to make sure they can navigate the real world, tell time, maintain, be accountable for their own money, be able to have a job or move on to secondary, post-secondary education. We want to make sure that they can get around town and navigate, read maps. So, strong literacy skills and those functional math skills for when we think about our students with Down syndrome. We want our students to have a sense of belonging, to feel part of a community, to feel that they have a social responsibility to be part of that community, that they're welcomed and they're appreciated and they're valued. We want them to have independence. We want them to be able to move out of school and be able to take this world by the reins and live out their dreams and their goals independently. And we want our students to have a sense of generosity. We want them to have empathy and compassion for others so that when they do educate themselves and they do feel part of a community and they do have the independent skills, they can give back. And at the end of the day, that's what makes the world go around. And we want all of the same goals for our students with Down syndrome. We also want to foster independence. Individuals with Down syndrome should be held to high expectations. We want to presume competence. The minute we start thinking about what students can't do is the minute we start failing as educators. Be mindful about learned helplessness. It is a thing. And a student with Down syndrome may very well rely on peers or an aide in the classroom setting or a teacher to do things for them that they can actually do on their own. So it's important for you to model those best practices that promote independence, to make sure that the students in your classroom understand that it's okay to help like you help any friend, but not to help too much. We want to make sure that our students with Down syndrome are able to experience success through their hard work and their effort and their practice. And we want to hold them to high standards. And then utilize peer supports to help reduce dependency on adults or a para in the classroom. Peers are, you know, their peers are who they look up to ultimately. And without friends in school would be a pretty boring place, right? With just only adults. And so make sure you're looking for opportunities to utilize those peer supports. And that's going to take you away from having to be that one-on-one or having to feel that you have to helicopter or micromanage a particular activity or lesson. Let the peers come in there, see how that works. They learn a lot from their peers, just like we all do. So ultimately, an effective education team takes ownership over a student's learning, has a positive belief and attitude about inclusive practices, models and teaches empathy, embraces diversity, utilizes best practices and effective strategies, understands the value of peer supports and facilitates social connections, utilizes different learning approaches to support varied learning profiles, integrates appropriate technology into the classroom, and engages in collaborative planning, co-teaching when possible. I wish we had co-teaching in every school, but the more we can collaborate and lean into each other, with the common goal of just creating a meaningful education experience for students, then the better off we'll all be. So I'm going to touch on this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on universal design and our modifications. We've got great information on here, but we also have an entirely separate workshop that's all about modifications and accommodations. In fact, we have that workshop recorded, and I'd be more than happy to send everybody a link to that workshop in our follow-up when we send you the link to today's workshop, if you would like, because it is a really helpful resource, and it's a workshop that we've recorded that's available on our website. If you want to take a look at it even today, I showed you our website and kind of how you can navigate. You can take a look at past workshops and presentations. But universal design in the classroom is so important when we're working with our students with Down syndrome. Universal design for learning gives us an opportunity to shake things up, to get creative, to toss out those old rules of everything has to be this way and no other way. Now we can look at each individual student's profile and differentiate the way we engage our students, the way we teach them, and the way they express their understanding. So with universal design for learning, we're able to provide multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, so students can demonstrate their understanding in numerous ways, and multiple means of engagement, kind of going back to that multi-sensory piece, getting hands-on in your learning so that it means something. It's more meaningful, it's real life. And that's what universal design is. And I think it's an exciting time to be a teacher, because before everyone had these worksheets and we printed them out and this is what we've been doing. And now we can have fun with it. I just love it. And I think the more we embrace universal design and collaborate and work together, the better off our students are going to be, and not only in the classroom, but in the world around them as they graduate and move out into the real world. I have here what we would call an effective formula, well, I guess an effective formula or a formula for effective differentiation. So when we're talking about universal design, we're talking about differentiation, shaking things up and providing different multiple means and ways to instruct a student. And the formula that I think is quite effective is all starts with knowing your student, understanding who your student is, knowing your student's IEP goals, understanding their interests and motivators and their strengths and their areas of need and their health concerns. Make sure that you have access to that information in a concise form so that you almost have like a cheat sheet you can refer back to. The more you have that kind of committed to your working memory, the more you can differentiate on the spot. You want to gather facts about your student and remember to focus on strengths. You want to gather facts about the classroom, the lessons being taught, and the teaching style of that particular teacher. And when we take a look at the facts about the student and the facts about the classroom, we can start to see mismatches. And once we see those mismatches or those gaps, then we can start to brainstorm potential solutions for the mismatches. And at that point, we can start to differentiate the content, the materials, the products, the assessments, and just the processes of learning itself. So it's really about focusing on where those mismatches are. And then you get to get creative with filling in the gaps. Let's say you have a student who has 50 sight words under his belt and has a goal of learning 25 more over the next 3 months or 6 months. And you are in a third grade classroom setting where students are starting to read, multiple chapter books, and they're getting pop quizzes, kind of like with the story I told you about my friend Will, who was clearing the table. Well, there's a mismatch there. Someone who only has acquired 50 sight words is obviously not reading books about Egypt that are multi-chaptered and have tons of content in there, right? And so that's a mismatch. So how do we fill in that gap? Well, we can differentiate the way he learns about the key ideas about the lesson. We can look at books that have been adapted to a lower reading level so that he can access the information in a different way. Maybe they have to give a report and they have to do a handwritten report about Egypt that they just read. Well, he has fine motor challenges, and expressing his ideas through a written report is difficult for him. Well, maybe we use a talking picture book that has pictures of the key areas and the key focuses of the content that you're going over. And we have pre-recorded statements that they worked on at home that tells the story, that gives the presentation in a different way. Maybe he loves drama, loves to be creative, loves to sing. Maybe he could sing a song about Egypt that he wrote at home or with a peer. Maybe he could act out a particular thing that happened as part of his report, or make a pyramid using materials because he loves hands-on multisensory experiences. So that's a way we can fill in the gaps. So he's still accessing the curriculum and the lesson at hand, but we are looking at his strengths, the mismatches involved, and we're coming up with a solution that makes sense and is meaningful to his learning experience. And you all have probably seen this graphic before that talks about, used to talk about equality, right? And making things equal. But when we talk about an equitable and flexible learning situation, we take it a step further, right? So when we look at the graphic that shows an equal experience, every child has the same size block in order to access the game. I always tell teachers when they say, when a student asks, why does this student get to use an iPad and they don't, they have to read it in a different way. I think about students in the classroom who might wear glasses, because I wear glasses all throughout school, and talking with them about, well, you see that Sally wears glasses so she can see the chalkboard. Does that mean you need glasses and you need glasses and everyone in the class needs glasses? No, because you can already see the chalkboard. So Sally needs glasses to see the chalkboard. You can read this whole book, you can hear what I'm saying, and you can answer these questions. My friend Will needs this, needs an iPad so that he can listen, because he needs to learn the same things in a different way. And so that's how we explain equity. So if everyone's equal, they've got the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily give them access. There's still a barrier here for the shorter guy in the picture on the left. If we make it equitable, okay, we don't need a block for the tall guy. The middle guy only needs one. And now both guys have, or the little guy has 2 blocks, and they can all see. So they can all see what's going on. But if we have a flexible learning experience, look, now we've changed it up. We have a fence that everyone can see, and we can see it in a whole new way, because we've now differentiated in a way that removes the barriers and gives us all access to learning itself. This is just an example of a 1-page profile. So something similar to this, you can create one for yourself, have a conversation with your school, with your home, the homeschool communication. So talk with the family, learn about your student, create a profile so that you have an easy reference sheet. And then when it comes to differentiation, modifications are a huge piece. I talked with you all about the inappropriate demand. So we're just going to go through these modifications. Again, this is an entirely different workshop, but I want to just kind of glaze this, I touch on these points, and then you are all welcome to access the link to our recorded workshop that focuses solely on modifications and accommodations. But just remember that our students with an IEP are entitled to modifications. They're entitled to modifications if they're in a general classroom setting and they are working below grade average, or being below grade level. They are entitled to accommodations and modifications through their IEP. And so when we're making modifications, we can change the what. It doesn't have to be, here are the accommodations to help you access the same thing everyone else is doing. We can change the how we're presenting it to you, how much we're presenting to you, how little, the amount of time it takes you, the content itself, the way we grade things. Everything can be modified. And I think it's important to understand you have that flexibility when you're working with a student who has an IEP, and especially if the student's in gen ed and they're not, learning at the same grade level as the other students in class. So we can do different content, delivery, product, processes can all be different. The student is not held to grade level standards. That's something that I hear a lot from teachers who are very worried that they can't get their student with Down syndrome up to grade level standards. And it's just important for us to just make sure that students who are working below grade level average are not required to be at grade level standards. And it is modifications are appropriate for students with IEPs. So with the modifications, we want to make sure that we're just using a strengths approach. A lot of times we hear the student can't do this, can't do that, can't do this. How can we ever have the student participate in this class? The gap is continuing to grow. So it doesn't have to look like that. We can utilize a strengths-based approach and start thinking about what the student can do. Can't write? Well, can they type, use tiles? Can they use assistive technology, copy, dictate to a scribe? Can they highlight? Can they circle? You get the idea, right? So as we move down, you can see it's all about just changing the way we think, reframing this to be a strengths-based approach, putting on that detective hat. When we're making adaptations, you can make them in lots of different ways, and there's tons of resources out there. So I'm just going to show you some examples of different adaptations. So with reading adaptations, you can use comprehension worksheets, graphic organizers or topic boards, adapted books online. There are a ton of adapted books. So if you've got a high school student and everyone's reading, you know, Shakespeare, you can find adapted Shakespeare. You can help them learn about the key topic, that, you know, the key characters, the main ideas, and you can adapt the lesson so that it works with that particular student's learning profile. It simplifies it, but they're still learning, they're still understanding those key pieces and components. Readworks.org is an awesome site that helps find lower level reading passages with comprehension questions related to the theme. So they've done the work for you. It's awesome. And you can pick what level you believe is appropriate for the student, and it gives you the passages and the comprehensive questions already. Comprehension, been talking too long. Writing adaptations. You can use different utensils, like sorry, I said utensils. You can utilize markers instead of a pen or a crayon. You can use a slant board to help support their wrist and that fine motor work. Boundaries. I like the papers that have the tactile lines so they can feel the boundaries. Dictate to a scribe. You can use a word bank or sentence strips. We love the Clicker app and Clicker sentences. It's not cheap, but if your school has it already, or maybe you could even through homeschool communication understand if that's something the family has ever used. It's a wonderful piece of tech that helps our students, especially when they want to express their ideas, but they have a more difficult time writing. And just keep the primary goal in mind. Is it a handwriting goal? Is it a spelling goal? Or is it actually composing your ideas and thoughts? If it's a handwriting goal, they're going to be handwriting it. If they're composing their ideas and their thoughts and they're expressing themselves, let's look for alternative ways for them to express those ideas and not pile on demands. Spelling adaptations. You can build words with magnetic letters or tiles, or fill in the missing letter, depending on what the goal is, right? So let's say, for example, in this particular lesson that we have an example of, this student was working on beginning sounds and digraphs. And so even though the rest of the class was working on a rhyme spelling, that student already had the apps pre-written for him. And then instead of having to write the beginning sounds, they had a bank of options that they could choose from in order to complete each word. So that's working toward their particular IEP goal while also still attending the actual class lesson, just in a different way. For science and social studies, it's really important that you understand they may not learn everything about the subject, and that's okay. They can learn main ideas and main key components of the thematic unit and the topic you're teaching about, and that's the main thing, right? So keep in mind of just focusing on these main ideas and key vocabulary. Make sure that you're making assessments that do reflect their IEP goals, their learning goals. Look for those hands-on multisensory experiences so that it makes it a little more meaningful. You can use your graphic organizers, visuals, word banks, simple sentences. You can use blank sticky labels, side-by-side modeling, maybe with like a para or a peer. The peer is working on it, and the student can, that peer can model and the student can work on it as well. This is just helping reinforce and practice and learn. And don't forget about the helpful resources we've got out there. Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, Pinterest. There are tons of ideas out there. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You've got a lot of resources. And once you start getting those creative juices flowing, it's a lot of fun to pull in ways. Okay, now I know how I can make science and social studies content less abstract and more meaningful to my student. And here are just some examples of work that's been modified to that particular student's level and for that particular student's IEP goals. Learning key topics of content, understanding vocabulary, being able to label. So instead of learning everything about photosynthesis or everything about, the plants and the process, we're labeling, we're coloring, we're getting that key vocabulary in. This is an example of side-by-side modeling. We're simplifying so that it's for a visual learner. They can organize, they can see their thoughts, and they can see what's asked of them. It's not overwhelming. We don't want to clutter up a page with too many things. We've got a nice big font here and simplified quiz, simplified graphic organizer. It's just a great way to, again, focus on what content you're trying to teach, making sure that it may not be what everyone else is learning, but it's the key content. And then you can find a way to be able to help your student express his understanding through these modifications. And this is from edhelper.com. Where you can print out different kinds of quizzes that relate to, core curriculum. That so they pull from the Common Core and they create these modified types of quizzes and lessons that you can get online at edhelper.com. With math modifications, it's always important to use lots of different ways to reinforce it, make it real, count things that they're into. If they like a certain character or a certain, you can look up, you can print out and cut up pieces that if it's something that's interesting or engaging to them. Calculator. Don't be afraid to use a calculator. That's what we use these days when we're out in the community and we need to do some quick math. We use a calculator. So introducing those calculator skills at an early age is just fine. And students can, because they have an IEP and we can modify it, they can use a calculator to check their work. They can try again. They can retake the quiz. It's about breaking down the barriers and making sure that we're making learning meaningful for our students. If that takes more time, if it takes trying again, that's all okay. So with that, healthy homeschool communication is paramount. Make sure that you know your student. You want to gather all the information, a holistic picture of your student. The more you know, the more you understand how to support your student in a meaningful way. We've talked a lot about that. Know your students' IEP goals at a glance. That's going to help you make modifications on the spot. That's going to help you plan for meaningful differentiation. And it's going to help keep everyone on the same page. Understand the WHs of the IEP. Who's making modifications? What are the modifications? How's this being done? Where's the accountability here? How are we going to be grading this student? Is it going to be, regular grading system based on their particular IEP goals? So it's not graded as far as like what the rest of the class is doing, or is it a portfolio of work that they present at the end of the year? Or is it a pass fail? These are conversations you can have with the IEP team and the family so that everyone's on the same page and everyone understands what to expect. We all actually need clear expectations. So work with parents to create a homeschool communication plan that's reasonable and manageable. Keep in mind that consistency and repetition are key for learners with Down syndrome. So if there's anything I could recommend to you guys is getting lessons to families as far as key content that you think would be valuable for your student based on their goals and based on the curriculum. And give families an opportunity to practice at home. the more that student can access that, and we can make copies of that assignment and they can work on it over and over again, the more they're going to learn it, because repetition is key. And so I do want to let you know, I always let my families know that school districts can promise you a Chevy, but they're not going to give you a Cadillac. And so please don't request the Cadillac. So for parents who, I try to let them know, we've got to be mindful that teachers are not just working with your child. And so healthy homeschool communication goes both ways. And I encourage families to work with the teachers to figure out a way that they believe they can communicate maybe more frequently than they do, with the other students, but in a way that feels manageable and reasonable for the teacher, for the family, and all just in the best interest of the student. Remember, if your student has an IEP working below grade level and it requires modifications, it is not your job to bring your student up to grade level standards. It's not your job to do that. And that's very important to remember. Use the curriculum connectors to align goals with Common Core standards. Every state has different curriculum connectors that will help you understand, okay, if my student's not working at this level, maybe there's a connector here that we can incorporate into their IEPs. Work with families to create goals that are SMART. They're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, and that will foster success beyond school. So we're looking at those life skills, the things that we want. Remember the goals of education. And then finally, transition. You want to start talking with the family early, middle school, about diploma track plans, to be transparent. Large majority of our students don't necessarily graduate with a typical diploma, but it's important to have that conversation because that helps shape your instruction. Otherwise, if you have a family who does want their student on diploma track, it will be up to you to hold them to grade level standards. At that point, we can't make modifications. That begins the freshman year. And they would have to learn and take all of the same standardized tests and pass all of the same things. If you have that conversation and the family says, look, I want my child to get the social piece from school. I want my child to have a sense of belonging and community. I want my child to have independent skills that are going to foster his independence beyond school, but I do not expect him to pass all the same tests as all of his neurotypical peers are going to be taking. Then you can, then you have clear communication, clear understanding, and that's going to help you continue to shape IEP goals that are going to serve that student in real life beyond school. Create an IEP and transitional goals that will support the transition, will support employment, will support independent living, all those life skill goals, and then involve the student. Our students have a voice, and we know that sometimes that voice may come in multimodal ways, but we are talking about an individual's life here. And our students with Down syndrome have their own visions, their own goals, their own desires, and what they want to do with their lives. Lean in on them. Make sure we're listening to them. We didn't give them a voice through all of this so that we could not listen to it at the end, right? So make sure that you're involving your older students in the transition planning, making sure that they feel heard and that their dreams and their aspirations and their personal goals are heard and acknowledged. So finally, and I appreciate your patience as this went a little way over, we're here for you. We're here to provide direct support, consult, training, and troubleshooting. We are a safe space. If your student's driving you batty and you feel like pulling your hair out, you can call me and tell me that, and it's okay. We are a safe space for you to ask candid questions, for you to express your concerns, and so that we can address them together and help get everything back on track. We offer our free webinars and workshops. You have access to all of those on our website at dscba.org. You have access to our lending library. Again, it's full of evidence-based learning approaches, math, literacy, call me. We can talk about those. We can set up an appointment for you to come in and check out some of the materials in our lending library. You can trial them. We will loan them to you and your school for 3 months so that you can trial these approaches in the school setting without having to purchase anything to see if it is a good fit for your student. And then access to our low tech communications library, which we went over together. And again, ability awareness presentations. I encourage you to talk with your schools, your families, and bring us out. It's at no cost to you, to your school. And it is really an invaluable experience for everybody involved. So I'm here. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me till the end. And with that, before we leave, does anyone have any final questions, comments, or all of the above before we sign off? Nobody? Well, good. Hopefully that means I did my job. But if you do have any questions at the end of the day or anytime, and you want to reflect on this, just please feel free to email me anytime. My email address is listed here at the bottom of this page. And again, we will be sending out a recording to you all in 2 weeks. We'll include that modifications and accommodations workshop as well, just so you have that extra piece. And we're here for you if you need us. In the meantime, thank you so much for your time. We really value and respect it. Sorry I went over. It's a lot of content, and I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.